Back to the Dean Obeidallah show. Joining us now again is Professor Jason Stanley, professor at Yale University, author of New York Times bestselling book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us of Them, and also the great book, Erasing History, How Fascists Rewrite the Past and Control the Future. Professor Stanley, nice to see you, my friend. And you were on just 2 weeks ago, and I reached out because I want to read something that you said 2 weeks ago, which really struck a nerve. So first of all, thanks for being on. Let's do the normal chatter there.
Right. Of course. Thank you, Dean, for doing what you do.
I love when guests always say that, like, thanks for having me. Everyone knows, look, I thank the person for coming on. You're spending time on this show. You don't just have to thank to be on. Yeah, I made time to do your show and not get paid. I don't know why but let's put that aside. Here's what you said a few weeks ago. Quote, if there are mass demonstrations here in the U.S., I think Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, will send in the military against the protests. And we'd start to see mounting deaths. And I find it kind of very prescient in what you said, because Pete Hegseth has talked about point blank having the U.S. Marines on alert at Camp Pendleton. And right now, Donald Trump, against the wishes of the governor of California, has called in the troops. And again, Professor Stanley said this 2+ weeks ago on the show about what we might see in the future. And here we are 2 weeks later. So what's your reaction to what we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, as expected, I mean, Trump is itching for a fight. He wants a mass show of force because he knows as his policies become ever more extreme, there will be more and more protests. So he really needs a violent event, clash, where he shows the cost of protesting. So as he shuts down more and more democratic institutions, as he takes full autocratic power, there's going to be pressure for mass demonstrations. So you really have to, show very quickly that, you're going to be risking your life if you do that.
So is that, like, how much, as of now, they've not called out the U.S. Marines. We don't know what tonight might bring. If there is more, if there's actions that they want to say is a predicate enough to bring people out, not even real crime, just to bring them out. But is this a trial balloon in your point of view from Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, you remember the Black Lives Matter protests when they sort of disappeared overnight in fall 2020 because of the fear that Trump was going to invoke the Insurrection Act, cancel the elections. So they sort of deliberately planned, I think, that they would stop. Right now, Trump is ginning up for a fight. When he tweeted against the protests at university campuses, he said, no more illegal protests. Every social movement has done illegal protests. Legal protests don't do anything. So an illegal protest is just a protest.
Right.
And so, like any authoritarian, we're moving into full dictatorship. So you're going to need you need to shoot some people to show that you mean business. So, nothing really has happened in LA. There haven't been mass protests. The protests are going to be, they're going to grow because of this. And they're going to face violent reprisals. And I think Trump supporters want to see college students shot and immigrants shot. And so that's the situation we're in as a country, a pre-Civil War moment.
So that's how you view it. This really is a pre-Civil War moment.
Yeah.
And what would take, and I agree with you, I think we're at war. The question is, what's the next step? We know what the Civil War did. History tells us that. This war could be avoided. To me, what I saw with Donald Trump calling out the troops is analogous to the attack on Fort Sumter in 1861 to begin the Civil War. The difference is this could be stopped. What would it take to stop it at this point before it gets any worse?
Well, you need it. Well,
I don't mean us. I mean, would it be Trump going, enough people on the right, Republicans in his inner circle, saying, hey, this is really dangerous what you're playing with here. This could get out of hand completely. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. Not us. We're going to do our protest on Saturday. Everyone knows that. I'm just saying, what do you think it takes to take a step back where we don't go the next step?
No, they want it.
They do.
Oh, yeah. So, and I think that immigrants face undocumented immigrants, even up to permanent residents, face an untenable situation. They're going to be sent to essentially quasi-concentration camps. They face a destroyed life. Maybe they'll spend the rest of their lives in tent cities here or elsewhere, surrounded by barbed wire, with their kids growing up without educations. So that's the situation. So if you face that situation, just the end of your life, what's your reaction going to be? Are you going to go peacefully, or are you going to have resistance? And so increasingly, if Trump is really going to be serious about this, there's going to have to be mass blood on the streets. And because, what's the, do people want to be sent to mass camps to live out their lives? Probably not. So, that's the situation. I think it'll be increasingly clear to immigrant communities that they have to resist, because it's not a genocide situation. I don't think they're going to be sent to death camps, but there's no life in the future if you're deported or sent to a deportation facility. It's not a life. So these are people whose families fled across, the Darien Pass, to come here. So, they're facing something existential. So up against that, you've got they know that. So, there's just an unstoppable force facing an immovable object problem. And I don't see how to avoid violence in that situation.
I'm chatting with Professor Jason Stanley. So you mentioned, with the focus being on migrants and immigrants here, what about US born citizens? I mean, this does not work. If Trump's goal is being the fascist dictator of America, which it really is, it doesn't work with just targeting migrants. It has to come after the rest of us, anyone who dissents. Is that fair to say? Is that where you see this going?
I mean, there's a certain percentage chance of that. It depends upon, in some countries, in like Hungary, they just kind of ignore people, ineffectual dissenters. That's you and I failed to stop Trump from winning again. So why would they sort of care about us, in a sense? So that's one strategy. Just be like, okay, we can hope for that. That's the optimistic one. Obviously, Putin chose another strategy, but unless we, we're not going to be calling for violence. We're going to be doing analysis. Are we a threat, or can they point at us and say, look, Jewish, Palestinians, raising objections to Trump, saying Trumpism is a fascist movement, and we have a fascist regime. How look at them, pointy-headed New York people. So that's a kind of move you could make, is just be like, who cares? In fact, they're helping because they can be vilified. So we don't know what strategy, if we can expect that any group that they see as a threat will face very severe reprisals.
My new book I'm working on is called Ineffectual Dissenter. That's what that's all. I'm going to be ineffectual dissenter, so I'll be free. Donald Trump is now calling people in LA. He wrote that LA has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. Now violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our agents. And then he adds this line, which is very Orwellian in a way, but these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. Maybe Orwellian's not the right term. Maybe Stalin-esque, maybe Hitler-esque.
Well, it's projection.
So tell me, does that mean something to you, the idea of telling his supporters, like, they are rioting, but this just makes us stronger, so don't worry about it?
Yeah, well, the whole painting political dissent as riots is a international, and dissenters as terrorists is just, I'm thinking of a teaching course in the future Who is a terrorist, where I show that every single freedom movement ever has been labeled terrorist. So, as anyone who's lived in the Middle East knows, that when you have all the channels, you switch one channel, this group's a terrorist, next channel, they're freedom fighters. So, this is all one of the things that is upsetting about the transition of the United States into an authoritarian dictatorship is that it's not an interesting transition. It's just a paint by numbers familiar thing with no interesting wrinkles. I would have thought there'd be some kind of cool way of doing it, but no, it's just like sort of boring. And so yeah, you paint, you want to, he's justifying mass, state violence against immigrants. So, and their supporters. So he has to paint this as a riot. That's just totally familiar from what happened in the 1960s, from Black Lives Matter. Any protest movement is labeled as a riot, as riots, and any protesters are labeled. And of course, once they start gassing, then, pepper, then there's going to be sort of rubber bullets, then live ammunition, and, it'll escalate. And I think, the problem is a lot of Trump supporters want to see blood on the streets.
It's interesting you say that, because that goes beyond just owning the libs. This is killing the libs. It's a different mentality. I think you make an important point that people should, and that's why I have yourself and other experts on authoritarianism on. These cannot be looked at in a vacuum. This is not today Donald Trump send the National Guard is the first thing that's alarming. It's paint by numbers. The last time you were on, we talked about Donald Trump targeting media outlets, Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising arm, universities, law firms, people you used to work in administration, dissent anywhere, anyone who dares stand up to Donald Trump, he uses the force of the government against them. So this is the next step in that playbook. And that's the sense that I'm getting from you. And I think that's an important message for listeners.
Yeah, it's the Ottoman Square kind of thing. The the force, I expect there to be some sort of large scale bloody massacre.
You do.
State. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a large probability. There's a sizable enough probability. I don't know what that probability is, but that would be an authoritarian playbook kind of thing. Take some, create a moment where there's a lot of protesters and then, shoot them all or something. That's certainly a possibility in what we see. And so I think it's one people should be prepared by. And unfortunately, I think, we should be prepared for some Americans rooting that on.
And when I've read some historians and experts on autocracy, they talk about the difference between targeted repression and broad repression. And targeted, it's easier to get away with because you're not being personally affected. Right. Broad repression, like using the military to kill a bunch of protesters, has the potential to spark a true backlash, like a real backlash. And the Trump people have to know that, though.
Well, they're itching for a fight because they have the apparatus of the state. So, I think they want a backlash. They want a backlash so they can really, totally call a state of emergency, invoke the Insurrection Act, and finally end this whole sham of a democracy.
I mean, isn't there a potential like that Battle of Algiers where you go too far against the civilian population and it causes the backlash to get even greater to the point where it drives a government from power? And I know I don't want to be optimistic and say it's going to happen, but I'm saying human nature.
Well, I don't want there to be violence. I don't want there to be.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying human nature is human nature.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what will happen. I don't know what, I mean, I think, Donald Trump has 40% of the population who will die for him. So,
I hope it's not that high. I know he's a 40% approval rating. He get about 33% of the actual registered voters.
I think he has a lot of people who, I don't know, 40%, but you're right. He has a lot of people who are come what may, diehard Trump supporters. So you are talking about a situation that would be some kind of civil war. So and then you have a lot of people who think that too many people in the press who think that scenario. I don't put a percentage on it, but it's non-zero. And so the dynamics you're talking about are the dynamics that would lead to a civil war. So, I hope we don't go that way. But I think, he's trying to incite protesters so he can, do a kind of um, uh, emergency Reichstag enabling act in
Mhm.
Nazi, that enabled Hitler to take full power. So that would make sense in the authoritarian playbook. Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. But he seems to be pushing for this emergency moment. And as I said, what are you going to do if you're an immigrant? You can either wait to be deported and spend the rest of your life and your kid's life in a detention camp. Um, so I don't know what the future will bring. But I don't see, I see the supporters of Trump, many supporters of Trump kind of itching for, you know, the kind of hate speech, dehumanization
Mhm.
of not just immigrants, but also Democrats and
Right.
progressives and college students. It justifies mass violence. Now they have the apparatus of the state. So, yeah, you would need a mass protest movement. You would need an understanding that you're going to face state violence. The civil rights movement worked because people were willing, nonviolent protesters were willing to be beaten on television. Whether that strategy will work again or whether there is no more empathy, whether too many of Trump's supporters are just like, okay, let's see some college professors get shot. Whether that's, who know? I don't know enough. And the
I
future is
understand.
not written.
I mean, is it alarming to you that Stephen Miller wrote online that this is a fight to save civilization?
Yeah, that sort of talk is of course justifies, you know, uh, you know, killing people. So that the Nazis talk like that. Like if you read Goebbels, you always do that when you're going to kill a lot of people. Like if you read Goebbels' speech, "Communism with its mask off," I encourage people to look that up on the web.
Okay.
It's all about how the Bolsheviks threaten the civilization itself. The Jews threaten the civilization itself. The entire genocide of Jew that killed most of my family was justified on the basis that they were a civilizational threat. Whenever you're the Putin's speech in the eve of the full-scale invasion, civilizational threat. He claimed Ukraine was a civilizational threat. So yeah, I mean, we've been seeing this genocidal speech for a very, very long time, and uh, people are like, oh, they're just talking, it's just political. Could be, but the we don't I mean, you have all the conditions for mass state violence with lots of deaths being completely justified on every single level. Whether we'll see it, I hope not.
Is there, should Democrats that have power be using every legal means to fight back now? And what I mean, for example, and what I like Gavin Newsom raised on Friday when there was reporting that the federal government, Trump was going to cut off all funding to California. He said, well, we give you 80 billion more a year than we get back. So what if we just stop giving you federal tax money? What about blue states doing things now and saying, we're going to strangle this administration in terms of money? And we're going to protect our citizens against prosecution. You give the money to us that you owe the federal government. However, the legal apparatus is, that at least plausibly there's an argument there. Should they be using everything like that, including defunding the federal government under Trump?
Of course, everything. Masha Gessen said in an interview published today in the New York Times that when you make the shift to dictatorship, as we're doing, at every moment you look back at earlier moments and say, oh, that things were still possible then. So this is everything. We have to stop Trump from invoking an American Enabling Act. We've got to, we must understand we're facing a fascist dictatorship. Uh, you know, uh, I think I decry violence for a number of reasons. Also, that it's probably not effectual in this circumstance, but also it's immoral and stuff like that.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, everyone has to recognize that this is a fascist dictatorship, and so you got to stop it earlier. It's the courts are still operating. So they've given the Supreme Court has given every weapon to Trump they can. But, everyone has to do everything that is nonviolent that is possible.
Oh, it's been a team effort by the GOP to get
Yeah,
us to where we are over the
right.
years. From
Yeah, they're 100% in support. And
yeah,
so we have to recognize that there's a fascist political party fully, and it's a machine behind Trump. And when Trump is gone, they'll still probably, I mean, unless we really can save things, it will still be, uh, we'll still be living in an authoritarian society.
yeah. I mean, the GOP has been going down the anti-democratic path for years now. There were studies that were in 2014, 2015 that I wrote about American politics, showing how Democratic Party had kept to the norms while the GOP had dived way down. And that's before Trump even won in 2016. That's before the coup attempt and the January 6th terrorist attack and pardoning the terrorists. So we are way beyond all that. So you've said several times, we're living in a fascist dictatorship. Do you say that academically? Do you really believe right now we are living in a fascist dictatorship?
No, we haven't had an enabling act yet.
That's the last thing that's saving us.
So the kind of emergency, okay, now we have to. So we live in this nether realm where they're laying the groundwork. They've laid a lot of groundwork. The courts are still functioning. We can still have this conversation.
We're ineffectual dissenters, so
Right. So we're going. Certainly, we're a few moments away from that. There's a fascist social and political movement running the country. There's a concept by my new colleague at Toronto, Lucan Way, competitive authoritarianism, where you still have fake elections and stuff like that. So we could see novel variants, but we're heading to, if you look at Trump supporters, that some of them think he's been appointed by God. So, we have all of that. How do you deal with that? It's unclear to me. I don't think, Biden dumped a whole lot of money in red states. It didn't seem to help. Um, so, uh, so, you know, uh,
well, how much of an existential threat to our democratic republic are we living in right now?
we're not in a democratic republic.
It's done.
It's done.
You think we'll have an election in 2026?
Yeah.
It's full and fair?
It doesn't, well, I don't know if it'll be fair. It's already not fair because of all the gerrymandering
Right. Well, that's
and
different.
the
Right. I
attacks
get
on
that.
the media. The media looks like it's going down soon or in serious trouble.
Mhm.
You can still, the more you take out the democratic institutions, the more popular the authoritarian leader becomes. So, but it doesn't matter anymore what Congress does. Because I don't think, I mean, it's just, there's only, they're even saying, I mean, Gasson talked about, vertical power, and pointed out that the unitary executive theory is that. So I think, we're heading to a situation where sure, you could have, a Congress that is slightly balanced towards the opposition party, but will it matter?
Donald Trump signs executive orders. He doesn't care about. Well,
Exactly.
last couple of things. I'm chatting with Professor Jason Stanley. How important, though, is the protest like this Saturday? No Kings protest. It looks like it's really building. And depending what's happening in LA, it might turn out to be a massive, like the Women's March almost from 2017. How important is it if it is a massive protest and it's peaceful and it goes fine? People don't get hurt. Everything goes fine. But we see across America the opposition to Trump. How important is that?
It's essential. People are like, oh, it might not work. Well, if you don't have mass protests, then you're definitely screwed. It's
Right.
absolutely essential that every single nonviolent means is taken to stop this fascist takeover.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Professor Stanley, I want to I know we squeezed you in today in between other interviews. I appreciate your time, my friend. I look forward to chatting with you in the future. It's a surreal time to talk about America the way we are, but I think we have to be blunt and honest, and we can't sugarcoat it. And the way you talk about it, I appreciate it, because you're waking people up who might be slumbering through this, not thinking it's not that bad. It's really that bad. I don't know more to tell you, Bill. It is.
Exactly. Yes.
So thanks, Professor. Have a great day, my friend.
You too, Dean.
Take care.